You've started your seeds indoors and it's almost time to get them in the ground. But first, we need to get these hardened off. You don't want to skip this step. No matter how you grew your little seedlings, whether it was in a greenhouse like us here, or in your house under some lights, or even in a cold frame, they're all going to need to be conditioned to the outside elements. Now, hardening off is just the process of gradually exposing these little guys to the outside conditions. If you're anything like me and just a little bit impatient and you want to get those transplants right out into the ground and you think they're going to be okay, well, they're probably not going to be okay. You've put all that work into it, so you definitely want to put the work in to harden these guys off. Don't fall for that trap. These little seedlings have been pampered. They haven't been exposed to any wind conditions, the UV sun rays that are so intense, or they haven't been exposed to the temperature fluctuations. Their leaves are much thinner than any of the leaves that are on plants that are outside. This is why hardening off is so important, so that they can develop those hard cells within their leaves, and that withstands a lot of these temperature fluctuations, the sun, and the wind. These plants have been outside for about a month, and their leaves are hardened and they're darker green, and the cells have hardened. So that makes it to where they can withstand the conditions outside, as opposed to the ones that are inside and haven't been hardened off yet. When you plant your seedlings out without being hardened off, then they can easily sunscald. And when they sunscald, you'll see this white silverish color on the leaves, and then they continue to just die back. Sometimes they recover, but most of the times they don't if it's really severe. But those that recover, they're working so hard and they're struggling so hard to produce new leaves that they're really set back. We need to introduce our seedlings to the outdoors, and there's several methods and ways of doing this, but the main thing is to introduce them in little increments every day and increase those increments every single day. One thing we don't ever want to do with our tender seedlings is to put them out when the wind is blowing, because these guys aren't ready for it, and it'll cause their stems to break and it'll stress them out. A slight breeze is just fine. Another thing is to put them out in full-blown sunlight, especially the first couple of days, because this will just create sun scald for them and set them back and stress them out. We also want to watch our daytime temperatures. They should be above 40 degrees when we start to harden up our seedlings, because if it's below that, then we're going to stress them out and cause them to possibly freeze. The cold crops are going to handle it a little bit better, but we definitely want to be careful with our warm season crops. If we have a cloudy day, that's the best time to be putting them out, but that's not always an option. If you have your transplants out and the wind came up and they look a little wilty, they're just going through a little transition shock, and so if you bring them in, they should recover within just a couple hours. When we're hardening off our cool season crops, our broccolis, cauliflowers, cabbages, and kales, then we want to make sure we're hardening these off about a week before we put them in the ground. But when it comes to our warm season crops, we got to make sure that we harden them off no more than a week before our last frost date. I even prefer to do it at the frost date so that we don't have any worries of causing them to freeze. When you start to harden off your seedlings, we'll bring them outside in the morning after the sun is up and put them on a porch somewhere where they're protected and they don't get the hard winds or the UV rays that's hitting them. We'll want to leave them there for a couple of hours. This will start to condition them a little bit, and then we'll put them back in. You might want to set your timer, because if you're anything like me, you'll probably forget. So the next day we'll bring them out again, and we'll just increase the time every day by an hour or 2 hours. And then we can start to inch them into the sun just a little bit more each day. We'll want to do this until they can be in the sunshine for several hours a day. And then we can start to leave them out overnight for 1 or 2 nights before we actually plant them. This conditions them, and you'll start to see the change in the leaves, how they start to get thicker and they start to look completely different. One of my favorite things to do when I start to bring them out, especially those first few days, is use a floating row cover over the top of them. I'll just lightly cover it and tuck it in. That just seems like they condition to the environment just a little bit better, and I feel a little bit safer if I can't get to them right away. Most of the time when you're buying starts from a nursery, they've already been hardened off, so you don't have to worry about it. Unless you've bought them from right inside the greenhouse, then you'll need to go through this process of hardening them off. So after 7 to 10 days, it's time to start getting them into the ground. But you're going to want to look at your forecast, because if you're expected high winds, obviously you don't want to be putting them out. Or if you're expecting a really cold snap, then just hold off for a couple of days for better weather. Now that we've hardened off our seedlings, we're going to have a better chance for good production. Thanks for joining us in our part 5 of our indoor seed starting series. Till next time, we'll see you in our next episode.